brand this summer. And I'm our facilitator today. Thanks for starting the recording. And we do have a presentation today from Bill Finnegan and Josh Ettinger from University of Oxford. But before we pass it over to them, I wanted to open it up to everyone to share any announcements. Yeah, hi, Wendy.
I have an announcement. I often don't because we do things that have long and repetitive cycles, but we learned last week that we are part of a small, tiny part of a very large effort. The NSF awarded OSU and over a dozen partners a new science and technology center to go explore the oldest ice in Antarctica. The current ice record goes back 800,000 years in ice cores, and they hope to extend it continuously to 1.5 million with discontinuous data back to 3 million year old ice. And they're doing new modeling and new instrumentation to achieve this. And we are a tiny piece that will get to bring their science by the addition of a new summer course for K-12 educators. So you may know we offer PD to K-12 teachers to learn about atmospheric science and oceanic science, and we have not had a summer PD and climate-related science. But this program will allow us to connect with the subject matter experts from the Coldex Science and Technology Center and offer a third course called Project ICE. So this is breaking news.
Very cool.
The NSF and the OSU press releases went out last week, but the AMS press release now will probably come along today. So very excited, long time in coming, and our teachers are already lining up to want to be the first ones to take the class, and it won't be till 2023. So
okay, that's what I was going to ask.
A while.
That's awesome, Wendy. Congratulations.
Yay, good news.
Yay. Yeah, ice cores and old ice. I love it.
And we build off the Dartmouth School of Ice that has been done for undergraduate educators. We've been partnered in that along the way. So Oregon State, Frank.
Cool. I think I'm going to go, we've got a few hands up. I'm going to go in the order I saw hands. So Cheney and then Jim.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. I've been working with a climate literacy group in the Bay Area that's working to draft and pass resolutions at districts. And the person who's working with LA Unified is really excited about kind of the energy and money that LA Unified is putting forward for PD around climate education. And so it's kind of an announcement for, I've been doing a little bit of work, but I'm too small to like kind of take the scope of what LA Unified is looking for. So if anybody has folks that I was thinking about Climate Gen and ACE. And so I'm just going to put my email in the chat. And if that sounds like you have resources or people or contacts I should be talking to, if you could please let me know, that would be great.
Awesome. Is Kelly Lee involved in that at all? Do you know her?
I think that is a name that sounds familiar. Yes, Lucy.
Yeah, she's done a lot of teacher PD in the LA USD area.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Cheney. I don't know if we've met before, so thanks for coming on the call. Nice to meet you. Jim Callahan, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Reb. So quickly, update on the Association for Science and Technology Center conference that's coming up. They've now released what the sessions are, so we know what everybody's doing. And the conference is happening late September. I don't know exactly when the pre-conference Frank's doing is, but it's late September, October 1st, and then the week following in October. There are 12 sessions that are related to climate or climate action. There are 14 that relate to the social justice, DEI, 6 related to youth, and then of course the one pre-conference is going on. I will put on the network both the link to the full list and things I put together of sessions that I think would most be important. And of course, Clean has a presentation there. So thanks on that.
Sorry, Jim, I missed what is the actual event?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So commonly known as Aztec, but
Oh, okay.
ANTC, Association Science and Technology Center. So it's the Science Museum professional
Yep.
world.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, and if you have any info you want to put in the chat, as well as sending it on the listserv.
Yeah, sorry. I'll put the link to the full list there.
Cool, thanks. Frank, I think you're up next.
Sure. So some of you may be tracking the Laura Shifter's work with the Aspen Institute on K-12 climate action and specifically the commission. The commission has been going for quite some time. I've been talking with Laura about this for years, but she finally got the resources and the standing. The commission's report will be released next week on the 21st. The exact location and time of that commission, but really think about the commission's report is how do we bring the full education sector online in response to climate for the nation? That's a pretty heavy lift. So just something to track as they're moving forward. I think it's going to be bold and important. So just something, I don't have the exact details on when that is.
Nope, and you're saying it's coming out soon, Frank? Oh, there it is, on September 21st. Just like a week from today. All right, other announcements? All right, then we can get started, and I will introduce our two presenters today, Bill Finnegan and Josh Ettinger. They're both PhD students at University of Oxford School of Geography and the Environment, and they're here to tell us about a new campaign that they started to help encourage conversations about climate. And the campaign seeks to inspire and track 26,000 climate conversations around the world by November 1st. And Josh's interdisciplinary research explores the notion of teachable moments in the wake of extreme weather events. And in particular, he's examining the potential role of extreme event attribution in helping galvanize support among the public for climate action by connecting human-driven climate change to specific extreme weather events. And Bill is based in the energy team of Oxford's Environmental Change Institute, and his research explores secondary school energy and climate programs and youth climate activism in the UK. And he co-founded Tamarack Media Cooperative, a digital communications firm that supports a wide range of environmental organizations. So I'll put in the link to their full bios and their presentation, but I will turn it over to you both, Bill and Josh. Welcome.
Great. Well, thanks for having. Thank you all for having us. This is less of a presentation and more of a conversation and an opportunity to exchange ideas. So I'll just share my screen for a moment. Great. So this is really a student project. It's entirely student founded by a group of us PhD students. There's around 8 of us involved with this. And essentially what we're trying to do is something that I'm sure all of you will agree with. We need more conversations about climate change. Going on Twitter, when you see all these conversations, it feels like there's a lot going on, but we all know that this is happening really within this environmental bubble, and we need to break out of that. And in particular, some of you might be familiar with the literature that interpersonal conversations, really not just a tweet or a social media post, but really a back and forth with active listening and exchanges of ideas in a productive manner can be really powerful, but it's something that doesn't happen too often, especially in the United States. So this is a bit of our experimental project, using COP26 as sort of an opportunity to encourage climate conversations. We've built this interactive website in an attempt to sort of gamify climate conversations, to make it feel like every time you speak to someone, it feels a little more tangible. And I'll show you what I mean. So our goal is 26,000 conversations. It's a very ambitious number for just an organic project, but we wanted it to be exciting and ambitious, and just picked a number that felt right for COP26. And what I'll do now is just show you actually our website rather than just telling you about the idea. So the way it works is essentially anyone can come to our website and you visit our forum, which we've tried to really streamline. So I'm Josh, and I spoke to, let's say, Reb. She is my colleague, and you put down a location and you tell us what you spoke about. It has a clear limit on the length. We talked about environmental education, the need to have more climate conversations. You can add a tag or multiple. And the final bit I'll note is for COP26, if there's something that comes out of our conversation that we want to send to policymakers, to attendees of COP, we can add that. And we have some projects in the works to bring these conversations to COP, which we can tell you about later. So what happens is you submit that conversation and it's added to our interactive map. We have about 100 so far, but we're still quite new. We'll just pick a random one here. So this one came from Eve. She spoke with her father, Dennis, about extreme weather events in North Carolina. Well, they talked a little bit about Fox News, but it seems like, according to this one, the extreme weather events are waking them up a little bit. And we've actually there's some really interesting stuff on here, but it's this idea of to try to make conversations a tangible thing. And I can actually just play you a quick video explaining the campaign. Sorry, I need to, I think, enable sound.
Okay.
Is that working? Reb or someone else, can you just let me know?
Yep.
If you can hear? Yeah, great. Great. So I guess on that note, this is really where you come in. We've gotten a lot of feedback that this could be a potentially really useful tool for classrooms. And I'm going to turn it over to Bill now to talk through some of our ideas, but then we'd really like to just open it up and get your feedback. Would you see this as something you might be able to use in your, not just in classrooms, but also in formal educational contexts as well? Bill, do you want me to share my slides for you?
Yeah, I might as well get this back up since you've got it handy. So yeah, I'll just mention, my connection to the world of climate education is, part of my PhD, but also been involved a lot with NAAE and the EE Pro online community, and providing kind of technical web support for that. And so that was kind of the connection we had to this group. And again, thanks for letting us share this project with you all. So in terms of education, we actually, before the how, I guess it's worth saying the why. So, looking at kind of some of the literature on climate ed, Martha Monroe's kind of research review, there's some themes that seem to relate to this, the idea of making it personally relevant, engaging in deliberative discussions. So it feels like this could be the kind of tool that is a kind of helpful, productive form of climate education. And then for us, it's the question of how can we make this useful to educators, both in formal and informal settings, recognizing that, there's not much time between now and COP26, and everyone is already starting with their kind of autumn, fall terms. And so, the open discussion is what do you need? But I guess we had some ideas to share about how this could be used. So kind of, the next slide is kind of talks a little bit about, in the classroom. This could be an opportunity if you have a class, you're going to be talking about climate change, but you want to talk about it in a very kind of interdisciplinary way, where you might have students pair up and respond to these prompts, conversational prompts, and just see where it goes. But that at the end they could document those conversations, share these on this web platform, it becomes more real because they're part of this international conversation, and also because there's this connection that's been made between your classroom and Glasgow COP26, and actually Josh can mention a little bit more about how we might be sharing this in Glasgow in November. So then there's also the question of kind of outside the classroom. So as an assignment, we're particularly interested in these intergenerational conversations and kind of, breaking that silence between generations. And again, there's some research around this, which is interesting. But the idea that, could be talking about climate change in a lesson, and then it could, or again, some other educational setting. And then they go home, they have a conversation, they come back, they share what the conversation was about. And again, that could be posted online. And then the third piece, and this is one that we're still figuring out the best way to support this, but the idea that you could have conversations between classrooms, that a classroom in California could be connecting with a classroom in the UK or Global South. We've actually been speaking to the Foundation for Environmental Education and the Eco Schools program, and wondering if there's ways to kind of forge these connections between classrooms around the world. And to talk about the impacts that are being felt already, the action that's happening around the world. Again, young people engaging with other young people. Whether that's kind of a collective conversation between the two classrooms, or there's some way to kind of cleverly pair up people. And so those are kind of these three different ideas. But there's the question of what's useful. We're in the process of developing guides for some different audiences and for some different events. Again, a PDF that might just be a few pages long. And so we're hoping to get a bit of guidance about what you think might be useful. Is if we did put together something with some background information, some instructions for how to use the website, and then some conversational prompts that again were aimed at educational settings. Is that something that through this network or other networks would be useful? And what should we be thinking about as we put that together? And then the last thing that I was going to mention was just that. Oh, well, the other thing is I put a screen grab there, but it didn't save. Oh, never mind. That was some weird thing with our sharing the slides. It was basically all I done is grab from the website in that form. There's a particular thing if you're basically if you're consenting to submit, so you can go down to the, it's I am, it's the very bottom, yeah. So I'm 18 years or older, or age 13 to 17, and there's parental consent. There's just questions that, for the way we've developed this to be very organic, and to make sure that we kind of think about things like submissions from people who are under 18. And then also there's a note about the photos. We actually don't want anyone under 18 to be submitting photos, which is kind of preventing that from being an option. And those are in the kind of language of the terms and conditions. But of course, in classroom settings, there's always a question also around how to handle some of these things around data. And in some ways, this public platform is part of what makes it an interesting thing to bring into the classroom, but it also raises other questions around what's the right way to do that in educational settings.
And I'll just add, and that's something we'd also appreciate your feedback, this parental consent. We were encouraged to do it, to be careful, and just would that be actually a barrier, or is that something that you would say is rightly appropriate for this kind of a project? And the very last thing I'll mention that you might be wondering is that, yes, the submissions are moderated before they're approved, and we do have some guidelines on that. So yeah, thanks, Bill, for the education. That's the idea. We'd love any feedback or thoughts, criticism. Would you see this as being something useful in your work? And I did see someone, Seth from Climate Generation. We had been in touch. We're actually technically partnered with you. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Yeah. Great. I see a question in the chat. It's okay to 18 plus to submit as large groups. Sorry, James, would you mind clarifying a little bit what you mean by that question?
Jim, are you there? I think you're in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. So thank you, Reb. Specifically around the Fridays for the Future events and the big things are coming on, there's a ton of stuff, and Twitter's very active. I mean, what you're doing is really on time. But they're photos that could be submitted by someone over 18, but they're of huge crowds, and say half the kids are 13 to 18. is that something you would be okay with, or would you prefer like no minors ever to show up in photos? Just doing that. Whichever way, what you're doing is great. So.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I mean, technically, we just don't accept photos from anyone. Like, it's just hard for us to verify who is a minor and who isn't, and that's not the kind of capacity we have. So I think it would be okay, but if it was very obviously very young children, we would probably not accept it and remove the photo from the post. But really the functionality here is to avoid when someone who is under 18, if they click they are under 18, the photo upload box does not work. That's really the main thing. But it's actually a good question, something we should probably think more about to be careful.
Yeah, Frank.
Yeah.
Sorry, Reb, was that for me? I see Emily's
I
also got her
know.
hand up.
There's, yeah, Frank Granshaw. Why don't you go ahead? Are you there? There you are. You had asked the question in the chat about are you forwarding messages?
Oh yeah, I just basically wanted to find out from these folks how you're taking messages out of these conversations and bringing them to delegates or UNFCCC staffers, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that really is the big question for us as well, because everyone's wondering what COP is actually going to look like, how physical, how online. So we're in touch with a number of groups about a few ideas. If it's in person, our goal, and it looks likely if there's a lot of in-person components, we will have some laptops set up for people to explore that map who are physically at COP, but we'll also share links to that map as far as we can with attendees, delegates, negotiators. But something exciting as well, I don't want to make any promises because it's still in the works, but there's some possibilities of actually projecting the map and the submissions onto very public spaces in Glasgow during COP, which would be really cool. For what it's worth, Oxford, our university, is really into the idea, and they also want to do the projections, but I realize that's not really sending it to COP. So it's still up in the air. That's why we haven't really explicitly said where they're going, but we're going to get them there somehow.
Okay, let's see. Frank Neopold, I think you're next. Then Emily, and Cheney and Patrick. I'm not sure which order you put your hands up in. Go ahead, Frank.
So Josh and Bill, one thing in the past, in my position at NOAA, but also supporting the education, training, public awareness aspects of the treaty for the United States, or other work we've done with the White House, tried to make sure the bridge between what you're doing and the party delegates in the United States. But then under the treaty, there's the Action for Climate Empowerment, and then there's the national focal points. I'm one of those national focal points for the United States. But there are, a lot of over 130 other national focal points. So I would think that if you gave me a package of things that you wanted to brief the delegation leadership about what these stories are, that's an offer you can send me, and I will relay it to them because that's part of my function. So I'd be more than happy to, but I would think you would need to give them some entry point. Like, here are a couple highlights, a little bit of background, but I imagine not all the stories are the same. So there might be exemplars that you want to lift up. If you're going to be projecting, you'd be lifting them up. So that's one offer, and I'll put my email in the inbox. I'm pretty easy to find. But there's another one, which is the analytics and the analysis of all of this. If you have 26,000 conversations and more, looking at semantics, I'll put a link to a partner that I work with out of Austria, where they use semantic and linguistic analysis and looking at trends across lots of data, written data, and trying to see what's in there, because 26,000 is a large number. And so tools like that might be important to look at.
Well, I'll let Bill speak to some of the analysis components, but Frank, that's so kind of you to offer that, and that sounds incredibly exciting. So we'll definitely be in touch about that. Well, Bill, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the analysis bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've been thinking about from the start is what you can make, how do we make sense of the data as it comes in a way to share it again in COP26, but also, you know, in terms of taking the pulse of what people are talking about, how they talk about it, who they talk to. So I do think that there is something we've been thinking about and using, if we do get contributions that are in the thousands, yeah, we would have to be doing some sort of kind of computational approach to that and kind of natural language processing stuff. And so, yeah, but it'd be great to know about partners and any other models out there that we could be thinking about. So thanks for that.
Cool. Emily, I think you are up next.
Wonderful, thanks. I had it's just funny that this is something that we've been looking to try to create, because within our exhibits at the NCAR Mesa Lab and in Boulder, Colorado, we have a climate stories area where people who visit can draw, tell a little story. And we also have a traveling climate where it's very, you know, they write it on paper and they hang it up. And we've been looking for a way to do a digital version. And we have a 360 virtual visit, and we were thinking, how can we add a component of that to it? And so this is, you know, something very like right up what we're trying to do. So very cool. But one thing that we keep wondering about is how do you weed out inappropriate things that may get posted, and how, because I was just kind of curious your process on that, because that's something that, you know, our staff has to deal with in-person things that get hung up that we have to take down.
Yeah, Emily, that's amazing. And yeah, please do get in touch with us. I mean, it's a student project, and the way we get to 26,000 is through partnerships, which is why we're reaching out to all these groups. Yeah, if you go to our website and click on the terms, you can see we came up with content guidelines looking at some of other key social media platforms, you know, no hate speech, things like that nature. Yeah, and we do read them and look at the photos. Yeah, but happy to talk more offline in detail.
And one other thing I'll add is that, I don't know if this was clear in the submission form, but we also have an option that if you're doing this through some sort of partner organization, you can enter the name of that partner. And so that's another way that we can aggregate content and share it with any partners. And, you know, there's some potential analytics there that might be useful to them, or potential kind of social content that could be useful. So that is something that we've kind of built in to the system.
Thank you, Bill, for I failed to mention that. That's super important. So yeah, because given the partnership, so when we're going to be working with Climate Generation, so if someone as part of your exhibit did a conversation or submission, if you instruct them to write the name of your organization, we can then feed back to you and say, here are the 50 conversations from your group that we received.
Sorry.
It's a very pleasant ringtone, though. I like it.
Yeah, Patrick, do you want to go? I think you're up next, and then Cheney.
Sure. This gets back to kind of the realm you're talking in with Frank, and I apologize if you addressed it in the presentation, I missed it, but I was curious to learn a little bit more about your underlying question in this work, in that I feel like if the idea is to look at 26,000 conversations and see what's going on in order to ask, like, well, is it more action focused? Is it more science focused? How can we provide useful resources in the context of these conversations? Or if it's actually to start the conversations themselves, in which case I might suggest providing more resources around helping people to do so. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Patrick. That's an excellent question, really. And well, if you dig around the website, we do have some prompts, and that was actually one of our questions for this group. So we had a big list of 20 questions, and we received feedback saying this is way too overwhelming, actually. So we've recently, with some help from some climate communications researchers, narrowed it down to really 3 questions that are our go-to prompts, which are, what do you think about climate change? What do you think should be done about it? And what might we do after this call to make a difference? That being said, you might think about different audience and things, but would be like putting prompts like that, or even more specific to types of issues, be something that would be useful in a guide. And I guess moreover, that's sort of would a short PDF guide, if we put it together in the next week or two, even to send it out, would that be something you might use before COP in your own work? And that goes for everyone in the call.
Just to follow up on that, I'd say one thing is that I feel like the research questions are almost secondary to the inspiring conversations. I think the conversations are what it's all about. It's kind of the Catherine Hayhoe model of the most important thing you can do about climate change is talk about it. And so that's where we're kind of coming from. And yeah, I think the resources that are out there, there's also groups like Climate Outreach, also based in Oxford, that we kind of share some of their resources about how to have effective conversations around climate change. So we don't want to recreate all of that, but we also want to kind of maybe point people to where they can find some of those things about just, it can be hard to have these conversations. What's a kind of good way of entering into the conversation and having a productive conversation?
Cool. Okay. Cheney, and then Jim, I see your hand, and then I'm going to insert myself into, but I can't raise my own hand, I guess. Go ahead, Cheney.
Thanks, Josh and Bill. I think this is really helpful. I work in ELA classrooms, mainly 3rd through 12th grade, but so talk is a big part of the work that ELA teachers do. And I think a PDF would be helpful, and I would certainly use it in the classrooms I go into. I think maybe even more helpful would be if you could put it together. I don't think it would take all that much, would be some kind of demo conversations between conversations between younger kids, maybe a conversation between an adult and a younger kid, and with some like tips on how to get started with a conversation, how to build off of somebody else's conversation, like how to respond instead of oftentimes with young kids, they'll say something, the other person will say something, and they're like, I'm done. So if you could have some tips that are visual video exemplars, that would go a long way in terms of traction and getting teachers to actually do this in their class. So I would say a PDF along with accompanying short little video examples that you get permission from kids and their parents to put on their website. I think that would go a long way.
Great, thank you. That's really useful feedback for us, and I think it makes sense as well. Yeah. And
Janie, that actually is a great link to what I was going to contribute, which is this is something that my ACE has worked on for a while, and I'll put in the chat. We did a whole study and research project on this. I think it was in 2015. Around student or young person initiated climate conversations, particularly with parents, and worked with June Flora at Stanford, who helped us do a lot of the analysis of it, and really found that we had changes in at least either reported by the parents or reported by the young people that they thought their parents had a shift in attitude after their conversation. And so I'll put in, this is the lesson plan. I'm going to put in a few links here. That's the page on our Climate Our Future, which you do have to create a login to get to. But here's the teacher lesson plan. And then one of the resources it links to is this little animation video that is just a short video about an actual kind of how-to for a young person to have a climate conversation, and taking it away from getting in the weeds on the scientific details, and getting it to making it more question and emotions based, and what scares you about this, and what do you feel what's something that you care about that is at risk because of climate change. So yeah, those are some of the resources that we've developed. We've never done anything around tracking them, but I'd be happy to send your materials out to our teacher network, and we have a teacher newsletter that goes out on the first Tuesday of every month. So I think October 7th is the next one. If you wanted to get me some small stuff, that we'd be happy to share that out with our teachers. That's probably the best one to do it in before COP.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reb. These materials look excellent, and it's so helpful for us to not have to reinvent the wheel. And we're happy to share your materials with all of our participants as well. So I'll be in touch. We'll be in touch with you about that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put my email in here too. And then I know Climate Generation has done a bunch with climate conversations as well. Is Seth still here? Oh, yeah. So I don't know if you want to put things in the chat, Seth, that I know you all have done some workshops that include climate conversations in the past. Okay, Jim, I think you're the last one with your hand up.
Great, thanks, Reb. Let's see, really backing up what you all doing is right on time and really good. I was going to speak from the experience of Climate Club, which is in DC, our Climate Club DC, students who are very active on taking action in climate change. And when we were deciding with the kids whether to go on Twitter, one of the questions was, well, will that just generate a bunch of trolling, that they'll be under attack and all kinds of stuff, and gee, we don't want to do that and that kind of stuff, and that's not what we're about. And then, but learned that we could go on Twitter and very successfully and link up with a lot of students and do things in a way that is sort of between friends. The conversation is between friends. It's not much, it is true, it's not much of a conversation. It's more like we get to know each other, we link to each other, but it's sort of like maybe there's an occasional retweet. So the conversations is a very big deal to have that generate. But the thing of but to avoid the trolling. So I think that's one thing that you can help to do it, to have it go big and have people see it without, when it gets too big, then we get in all of the climate deniers and the people trying to, they don't care about the kids. They come in and they just start saying, disrupting and things. So that's great. So then if I could, kind of a question here, because this is so important. What we're talking about are middle school and high school students who are now using what they have visually to communicate with language arts and visual arts. Okay, so this is where my question comes in. They're using the fact that they're in Washington, D.C. There aren't other students around the world who can go and survey the U.S. Capitol and the White House and NOAA, and their students are able to point out by the room which senator and which congressman is wasting electricity with an incandescent and which one is efficient. Which part of the building, down to the room, down to the light fixture, they are able to tell where there's waste. And that's a thing, so they can start making change inside Congress without, you see how, it can be done, right? It's not like, oh, gee, we have to pass a big bill. No, change the damn light bulb. And the kids are doing that. And they can go to the White House and show how the new guy has already changed the light bulbs that the old guy had. I mean, we know that, looking through the windows with these cameras. So they want to communicate that through not only visual arts, but language arts. But so my question is, I'm a little confused, and maybe just I'm not listening that well. So thank you on doing this stuff of what is okay for them to submit to you. They can do their words. They have photos of what they take, like you want to see Senator so-and-so's office, they'll show you a photo of what that guy's doing in infrared, right? We know that's okay. But can they show photos of them taking the images, because they're 13 to 18-year-old middle school and high school students with parental permission releases to use that photo. They're already on Twitter, but what I'm trying to get is, do we have to tell the kids, we can never show any images of you doing this climate action work? Do you see what my question is?
Yeah.
But please, this is a big applause for what you're doing.
I said I'll hop in briefly, but Josh, definitely add more. I think the distinction I might make is that the main kind of core purpose of this platform is to host those conversations, not necessarily as a platform for showcasing climate action that might come from engaging with the issue. And I think there are other means through social media and other web platforms, other organizations where that kind of is their core focus. And so for this, that photos that come out of it potentially are from the conversation. It's it's a selfie of the two people who talked, or it's a shot of the classroom, or the shot of the video link to a classroom in another country. That's like the type of stuff that we mostly have been thinking about that would be that multimedia content.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So again, as a way of inspiring conversations, the way this might sort of dovetail with your existing efforts here might be, okay, go home and have a chat with your mom or your dad, show them the photos, ask what they think about this. And then the student would report back, I spoke with my mom about energy efficiency in the White House. We talked about politics, etc. So it dovetails nicely, but it's not, you wouldn't just post the climate action. We're really looking for a back and forth exchange. And this call is making me realize we really need to make sure and really clarify our photo rules in terms of ages. So thank you for raising that.
All right. Other thoughts, questions? Did you both put, is there a website or something to put in the chat that we should reference if you want us to, or anything that you want us to share on social media?
Yeah, thanks. So I just put the link in the chat, and I'll also put my email. I mean, to be honest with you, it's been a little difficult. We haven't started really working with educators where we think a lot of our submissions are going to come from, but social media has not been a major driver for us. We've received 100 submissions so far, but we really need help getting the word out. And yeah, it's really built for partnerships, so we'd just be really grateful. If it's okay, Reb, I can share some materials with you after the call that could be shared around. I think that might be.
What we often do when we're asking people to collaborate with us on a campaign is put together like a, what do we call it? Like a partner or toolkit, basically a campaign toolkit. So it's got like a couple sample social posts, something you could put in your newsletter, something that you could send in an email. Just like a couple pages, some, if you have graphics, the link to the web page, that kind of thing.
Yes, I just adding it to the chat now. Yeah, but I'll put that together as you requested. That sounds great.
Cool. I like your hashtag.
The PDF kind of educator's guide, that I think was the priority for us now. You know, we have, again, some general language from just kind of a general guide, but I think now kind of focusing in on that kind of educator audience, you know, knowing that there's that upcoming newsletter in early October, knowing that, you know, this kind of semester term has started. So we want to get that together before the end of this month and kind of start getting it out. And so that's another thing we'll be following up with.
Frank Leopold.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Andy?
I'm sure Katie's
ahead.
all over this, but it's a perfect thing when you're ready with those guides to post directly into the Clean Network. We'll reach way more than the folks on this call. That's my board hat on. Did you see my board hat?
I see it. It's like a crown, actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
So I mean, one of the things you're going to obviously run into is a marketing problem, right? Getting it something that's great is only half of the work. Getting it known is the other half. Like, do something great, but then make sure it's well known. Coca-Cola's budget half of its marketing, half of its product. It's always a good reminder, right? So I put a colleague of mine at NOAA, Bruce Moravchik, who does an excellent, one of the best jobs about moving content like this out to large networks through other networks. So it's a network strategy. You know, Reb is definitely one with ACE, and then, you know, Climate Generation, and there's others, right? Earth Day is another one, but you know, really spending some time carefully going through all of the ways you need to post it. You're gonna have to saturate in order to get a response, and that's just in the United States. There are, so that's, I would just, you know, and there's some of us on this call who've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Bruce Moravchik is definitely one of them who's not on this call. But then the other piece is international, right? These are 26,000 conversations worldwide. And so then you start opening up to different partners outside the United States. Clean is principally a US network. And language is going to be an issue. I don't know how much of an, because all of what I saw was English. But, you know, if you want help with that, then there's different networks and different partners would come into that conversation. So that's a whole nother conversation. so I guess the question is, how much have you prioritized English language speaking countries and talked about whether or not that's going to be a big barrier? At the international level, sometimes English is the dominant language in climate space, which is weird, but any thoughts about, how you're marketing this both domestically and beyond?
Yeah, thank you. And once again, thank you for the connections. We'll take any help and advice we can certainly get. But when it comes to languages, yeah, it's something we've been working on, and it's a concern of ours. So due to just limitations on our own time, we hadn't translated the whole site, and we had just been encouraging Google Translate as a tool, but we're realizing that's probably insufficient. So we're probably, at least on the form, going to provide, and certainly the guide as well for educators, provide at least a few key languages to help enable that. Yeah, because I'm sure you'll all agree with me that we need to, open up to the voices who are less often heard. So yeah.
I guess one last thing I'll say, kind of building on the general point about marketing, is that I don't know if it's the same in the US. In the UK, it feels like there's lots going on in the lead up to COP. It's now lots of different organizations,
it's a crowded space,
shouting for your attention, and it's hard to kind of figure out what's the thing to focus your energy on and what's kind of the best useful resource, and always like, how do we collaborate and align and all of that. But anyhow, this is all just the lead up to COP. This is this moment. And that's kind of how we framed the website as it is now. But we also realized that if there's something to this, there's a life for this website after COP. And so it's, as a kind of general platform for sharing conversations around climate change, and Josh has probably put a lot more thought into that in terms of what that might look like, what it might be called. But, it's to say that this is not just something that, come November, we turn the lights off and it's done. We kind of see this as having a life beyond it.
Yeah, and if any of you have any feedback later on, or something occurs to you, or you try it out and you have some thoughts, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And if you have any resources that you think that you've created or your organizations might be useful, that's something we'd be eager to share with all of our participants. Yeah, and we'll just based on that feedback, we'll see how it goes. This is kind of an experiment. Yeah.
Patrick, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about your work, Reb, and the ACE work around texting. I was curious what y'all consider a conversation, because I wonder if it would be helpful not to limit it to a person talking to a person, and it might help you to hit your goal more quickly if it included things like social media posts and replies. I know for our class with creative climate communication that I help teach, we have 30 or 40 students do a social media post and require at least 10 replies, but many of them get a few hundred. And so within the space of a couple of weeks, we're able to get anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 replies from a pretty limited kind of outreach. Is there a way to incorporate that?
Yeah, I'd be curious, Josh and Bill, what you have to say. I think when we did this project in the past, we actually texted our Youth Action Network to ask them to have a conversation. But what we put pretty clear parameters around. This was an in-person sit down. Like, one of the opening things was like, ask them if they have 10 minutes to talk with you. So I think that I'd be curious to hear, like, does it feel important to you all to keep it in that human space, or are you willing to open it up into the online space? Because we did this like 6 or 7 years ago, so it's been a while.
And did you find that those constraints were a problem or helpful in your case?
I mean, we didn't actually research that part of the question. We set that up as one of our parameters. Like, no, this is what we want to happen because, and this is my bias as well, that like, there's connection and meaning that can happen in those in-person, like you're looking each other in the eyes, sitting down, making time for each other moments. So we set that at like the outset as one of the pieces of the experiment.
Got it. Well, that's interesting to hear. Well, just to answer your question directly, for our website, at least our rules or guidelines say it has to be a back and forth exchange. It can be in person or online. It could be for 2 minutes or 2 hours, but it has to have a back and forth. Now, we haven't seen many, I don't think at any, we definitely had online conversations. I haven't seen any sort of social media conversations. It's not something we don't allow, but it's also something we haven't encouraged much. So I appreciate the idea. It's something for us to think about, especially as you say, if they're really happening. But it would probably, it's sort of as Reb said, like the real focus here is really that to have that kind of deeper exchange where someone can feel safe to express how they really feel. And it's just, I don't think on social media that often happens, to be honest, at least to the same extent that an interpersonal conversation can have. Maybe some of you agree or disagree with me on that.
I'd throw it out there that I think part of it has to do with the conversation dynamic you're looking for. If you're looking for youth peer-to-peer, I do think there's some very meaningful things happening with social media interactions, and arguably some of the most meaningful things. So if you're looking for, I think in the case of Reb's work with parents talking to kids, a person to person was a really important piece of that for a lot of reasons. But I think in a space where conversations are more broadly defined, it might be interesting to expand that. And I don't know how you couch it in a way that, like, is it a post with one reply? Is it somewhat of a back and forth? I don't know the right limits, but I might encourage it as a space that does allow for some meaning, especially on a youth to youth level.
Great, thank you. That's, yeah, good food for thought for us.
Well, thanks everybody. This has been really great. And it's just like I have a special place in my heart for climate conversations. I think there's great research that shows it really is one of those rare things that can shift somebody. So thank you both. Please send out all your resources and as they come to the network. And we talk every Tuesday, so this is actually a great space to like mention things too and drop links in and tell people how things are going. We have a few minutes left in the call. I will leave it up to you all if you want to stay on and have more conversation right up until the top of the hour. I do have to go. So I'm just going to pass hosting off to somebody else because I don't want to end it.
I think we're good. I'm a co-host already, so it's probably good to just drop off, Reb.
It says end though when I click that, and I don't actually want to end the meeting. Maybe if I click end, it's going to give me a leave meeting option, but okay.
I think that co-host is different. So Reb, if you give Patrick just hosting, then that should do it.
Yeah, end looks pretty definitive. Like it's gonna end it. Let's see. There you go, Patrick. All right, cool. Thanks all. Good to see you.
Thank you, Reb.
Thank you so much.
Did anyone have any other sort of questions or feedback or comments?
Just one on the international level. ECOS, the climate education and outreach, and the S they're playing with, because it used to be stakeholders, and that's probably not the best word. But it's an international version of CLEAN, basically. And so if you're not aware of it, I would definitely think about engaging some of that network if you want to get into the people around the world who do this kind of work. That's where some of that international network for that could expand the scope of this. It's clearly an international conversation target you're going for.
Perfect, thank you. That sounds great.
And if I could actually run with what Frank said or amplify that, is working with the ECOS network, as many of us do. Part of our experience has been when we're in conversation with people in Africa, the platforms and the way people communicate in Africa tend to be different. Big surprise, because of the technological differences and so on. And we were struggling with that a little bit. And this can help a lot of especially if your platform, it can be the lingua franca and technologically of a place that they can communicate with that. We can communicate through you and stuff. But we were finding that kind of difficult to have some conversations a lot where it was assumed that they would use Twitter or they would use YouTube. No, they use something else. And just being aware of that. But being able to, returning though, it's deep in my heart what Frank was just bringing up of the need to communicate with other continents. If it's all just North America, it's a different conversation than the rest of the world, with the rest of the world.
Yeah, 100%. Great. Well, I'll just thank you all again. It's really great to meet you. And this just seems like a great community actually for both me and Bill to connect with in general, just because of our research and education interests. Yeah, and really appreciate the feedback and hope to stay connected.
And one thing, Josh and Bill, as a co-chair of the network, or leadership board, whatever we want to call it these days, remember that this is recorded and that a lot of people in this 800 plus network are lurkers, and they listen and they read emails. So you know, having announcing this in an email and the listserv is a really a great way to trigger them to come to this conversation. So, you know, just a follow up from this into the network might be a way to get to that wider. As Wendy said, you know, we're just a small subset of people who could be here at 1 o'clock Eastern time on a Tuesday. Not everybody has the ability to do that. So there's a lot of key people that were not here, like 700 plus people.
Well, we'll definitely do that. And I guess I'll just say hello to future video watchers.
Right, exactly. Remember, you're not just talking to us. It's actually it's like a wider thing. It's a weird thing because people were like, I know that voice. I'm like, what? That's weird.
Okay, great. Okay,
Thanks
well,
so much.
take care, everyone.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.